Washington Journal continues.
Senator Bill Cassidy is here with us this morning, Republican of Louisiana, to talk about his proposal for Social Security. Before we get there, Senator, though, if nothing is done about Social Security, what does the program look like?
If no one does anything for Social Security, there'll be a guaranteed 24% cut in about 8 or 9 years. So, and somebody, a radio host in Shreveport, Louisiana, Aaron goes, well, that's okay, because I'll already be on and I'll be grandfathered. No, that's not true. Those who are receiving money at that time, and all future beneficiaries, will by law get what amounts to a 24% cut.
That's a lot.
That's if we choose to do nothing, which I'll point out, both President Biden and President Trump's plans are effectively to choose to do nothing. There'll be a 24% cut in that which people are receiving. Obviously, that's terrible. And by the way, that will double poverty among the elderly. So it's just a choice we shouldn't make.
If you're 55 years old and you're listening to what you just said, or are you hearing from folks that are 55 and around that age, I mean, what kind of concern are they expressing?
Well, it's interesting. You've got President Biden and President Trump effectively saying that anyone that wants to do anything about social is making the wrong choice. So they're being kind of, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it by Biden and Trump. So we're not hearing that much, except when you go to people. I had a little video clip. It's on my Twitter account, my Facebook page, and we call it Bill on the Hill. And I went around and spoke to people who were visiting Washington, D.C. And the guy from Pennsylvania, he goes, you know, I've had a lot of jobs that didn't provide retirement. I'm going to need social. A 24% cut? That's going to be terrible. And then there's a doctor from Opelousas, Louisiana, who actually was one of my former residents, but now he's got long gray hair. And he goes, I'm a doctor, by the way, so I used to teach. And he goes, oh, my family, my friends will have to choose between medicine and food. So we know there's going to be terrible consequences. But again, we have two leading presidential candidates that are telling the American people, if anybody wants to address it, they're wrong. We're choosing to do nothing. And that means they're choosing that people will have to choose between medicine and food.
We were just listening to callers in our first half an hour who are already making those decisions. And then we heard a couple callers talk about they paid off their homes, they retired, they paid off their homes, but they're seeing those property taxes on top of these other costs go up so unexpectedly that is really cutting into their Social Security check now.
So I'm told that if you're currently 60 in good health, you got a 50% chance of living to be 90. That's important for a couple reasons. One, isn't it great that we're living longer? But some folks are going to live beyond their ability to work. So even if you choose to work after retiring, you get to 80, you can't work any longer. So when Trump and Biden choose to do nothing, they're saying to those folks who are going to live beyond their ability to work, you're going into poverty. We want to get elected, so we're going to pretend that there's nothing that needs to be done. And you're going to go into poverty, and they don't care.
So let's talk about what you want to do. This is what you're proposing. Would place $1.5 trillion over 5 years in an investment fund separate from the Social Security Trust Fund. Hold this investment in escrow for 70 years. Aims for an average of about 3.5% equity premium over the 70-year escrow period. And that would cover up to 75% of the projected shortfall, is what you're saying. Some might get concerned that you are putting Social Security and putting it at the whim of the market.
Boy, am I glad you asked that, because you answered it in the way you put it. This fund is separate from Social Security. It doesn't take Social Security dollars at all. It takes money separate, and we can raise that however we wish. There's so many empty buildings the federal government owns. We estimate there's $20 billion worth of empty federal buildings. Sell off a portion of that, you would be able to fund the $1.5 trillion. Do a lot of other good things too. And so you fund it, and it grows separately, we would repeal the law that says that current beneficiaries get a 24% cut. So we actually guarantee the promised benefit that right now is going to be cut by almost a fourth. And we are betting on the strength of the American economy. We don't place any risk upon the beneficiary. If the market goes up and the market goes down, that risk is in the fund itself. But we know over 70 years, if history is any prologue, that it's going to do okay. And that's how we take care of 75% of the debt.
Why not do the other proposals that have been on the table? Capping Social Security, et cetera, raising the age. Take them, each of those proposals, and tell us why you wouldn't do that.
Well, first, you should not raise taxes on seniors. You should not decrease benefits for seniors. Period. End of story. 2/5 of baby boomers their only retirement plan is Social Security. So if you go to them and say, by the way, we're going to raise your taxes or we're going to decrease your benefits, it's just a non-starter. It's just a non-starter. So you just can't go there. Politically you can't, but also morally you can't. Now maybe you can raise the age of eligibility for someone who's currently 30 years old. Okay, that would have to be on the table. There's still 25% of the benefit we have to address. That's why we need presidential leadership. We need a president who's actually honest to the American people, not giving them happy talk in the hope to get elected by giving them happy talk, but being a leader and saying, listen, we still got 25% we have to address. How do we do it without affecting those who are retired or approaching retirement? And let's do it in a way that we politically find that we can do it. Now, by the way, if all you want to do is raise your taxes, that's incredibly regressive. It falls heavily upon those who make the least in our society. That's wrong. If all you want to do is raise the age of eligibility, you got to raise it pretty far. So you've got to have a proposal which actually is rooted in reality. We feel like ours is rooted in reality.
All right, well, let's hear what our viewers have to say. Spence in Clarksburg, West Virginia, Democratic caller. Hi, Spence.
Yeah, I find this guy totally obnoxious because he's just trying to privatize Social Security. They already owe Social Security $2 trillion. All you have to do to fix this Social Security problem is to lift the caps. And if you want to cut benefits, let's talk about cutting congressmen and their benefits after they leave their office, which they have no right for. Thank you. I'll listen to your answer.
Sounds great. We're not privatizing social, my friend. We're taking a fund separate from Social Security. We don't touch Social Security funds at all. I'm glad you phrased it that way because that's a way that people knock us without understanding the problem. And so we're making it separate. Now, if all you want to do is raise the cap, President Biden's proposal, which he proposed in his last campaign, which he's never submitted to Congress, is to say instead of the top sum being $160,000 to which you apply the cap, then we're just going to raise it to infinity. But you know, he doesn't index that to inflation, which means that over about 15 years, every single American will get basically, if you talk to the economists, a 13% tax increase. Now, my friend, if you want to have a 13% tax increase, or if you want your children to have it, then vote for their proposal. Choose their proposal, even though he's never submitted it to Congress. But if you want to bet on the strength of the economy, as opposed to some president or Congress raising your taxes by 13%, then think about ours. And by the way, Congress is in Social Security. There's something out there on the internet that somehow we in Congress don't pay Social Security. We do.
What about his comment that $2 trillion is already owed to the Social Security program?
No, that's kind of the excess that people have paid in over time is invested in Treasury bills. Now, I'm glad he mentioned that. So when the American worker has paid in some years more than was paid out. That's what's going to be that's the trust fund. That extra money has been invested in treasuries. By law, it can only be invested in treasuries. Treasuries have a return, since they bought them 5, 10, 15 years ago, have a return of 1% or 3% or 4%. Under Biden, our inflation rate has gone up to 6 and 7%. We're losing money on those investments. It's just like the worst investment strategy you could possibly have. The money we have in real dollars is shrinking as inflation continues to be high. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, you can do that on social. We don't want to touch social. But in our fund, you would put it in the economy, say the stock market, and you allow that to grow. And over time, that has averaged since 1929, that's averaged, I think, 8.5% return per year. So you can either go to 3% return in the treasuries, that's the current model, or you can bet on doing what's happened over time, roughly 8.5%. We actually just estimate 8.34, but still you can invest on the 8.5, and that's how you bail out the system.
Deborah's next. She's in Westchester, Ohio, Republican.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Good morning.
I have some very specific, very detailed. Our programs for safety nets in the 80s were the earned income tax credit, which I agreed with in the 80s. But my family owned a daycare, and we have added so many wonderful safety nets. We've got CHIP. We've got CACSP. We've got, and you know what they are, and I won't go into all of them, but we've really added a lot. So I think we need to start reducing the earned income tax credit. The other thing we have to do is we have to address health. For whatever reason, in 2008-9, that period, we added any foods on our food program today on SNAP. We have 330 million people in the United States with diabetes at a cost of about $1,000 per person in the United States. So my approach is two-pronged. One is we want to promote health. There isn't any reason why, like CACFP is demanded at daycare, but it's only offered in elementary through high school. It should be both. We can say to the snack industry, when your snacks are CACFP compliant, you can be on the food program on SNAP. But until you make your snacks CACFP compliant, we're not going to allow those to negatively impact the health of the American people because there are so many other healthy things that taste great out there.
All right, Deborah, I'm going to jump in. Senator.
Deborah, you think so seriously about public policy. I'm so impressed. And I've never thought about these kind of things that you're, in terms of the nutritional aspect of it. But clearly, nutrition is a major contributor to heart disease, hips and knee problems, et cetera. And so let me just take those ideas and talk to my staff. I think you've got some great ideas.
Jennifer's next, Senator, in Oak Hill, Ohio, Independent.
Good morning. I read an article from Tampa Bay Times back from October 2015. They were talking about the Cuban Refugee Act, and those people that come over here that are 65 or retired already in Cuba, they're given Social Security. And now I see that Biden has extended that to anybody. There's no way we can sustain Social Security on the United States taxpayers paying it, and whoever wants to can come here and get on it.
Senator?
Yeah, so Jennifer, I'm not frankly familiar that people come here because my understanding is that you got to get your 40 quarters in. 40 quarters means that there's, 4 quarters per year, 4 3-month periods, and you've got to work 40 of those in order to be eligible. Without those 40 quarters, you're not eligible. But I'll look into the refugee status aspect of that. You said something else that triggered a thought. But by the way, that's going to be significant. We've got to address it. I concede that point. But what's really driving the insolvency of Social Security is that 10,000 boomers a day become eligible for Social Security. And when Social Security was put into place, when it was fully implemented roughly like 1948 or 1950, there was like 5.6 children per beneficiary, and the average age of death was probably about 65. Now, granted, if you got to 60, you lived longer, but the point being that people didn't stay on social very long, and there's lots of folks paying in to support them. Now, with smaller families, there's only like 2.1 people paying in for every beneficiary, and the average age of death is 82. I'm told if you live to age 60 and you're in good health, that you have a 50% chance of living to be age 90. So it's a lot of boomers retiring. I'm a boomer, so I'm part of the problem. A lot of boomers retiring, becoming eligible every day. It is longer lifespans and has fewer people paying in. That's why we need a different system, a system which guarantees the benefits that you're going to receive. Unlike President Trump and Biden, they're choosing to do nothing. We should choose to do something.
Lizzie in Indiana, Democratic caller.
Hello, this is Lissy. Hi, I'm calling to talk to you about how the government owes the Social Security money right now.
Lizzie,
How come they're not?
Lizzie, the senator addressed
Yes.
that, so I'll have you hang on the line and have him repeat what he said.
So, Lizzie, the way that works is that when there's been excess dollars contributed relative to the money going out, the Social Security Trust Fund invests it in treasuries. And so, yes, the government kind of owes it. But what I pointed out earlier, it's by law that you have to put it in cash or treasuries. And treasuries are only paying 1 to 3% interest. When we have inflation of 6, 7, and 8%, or 6 and 7%, the real value of that dollar is diminishing relative to inflation. That's why in this separate fund, separate from Social Security with no Social Security dollars, we would put it in the strength of the American economy, and that way you would compensate for inflation as it grows. The risk is on the fund, not the beneficiary, and there's no Social Security dollars in here. But right now we need a different investment strategy than what we have now because we're losing money with inflation.
And you want to put 1.5 trillion over 5 years into this investment
Yes.
fund. You talked a little bit about where that 1.5 trillion would come from, but can people learn more details of how you would raise 1.5 trillion?
Well, we need political leadership from the president because obviously you need both houses of Congress to support it. And by the way, we had a bipartisan group of senators supporting it, a bipartisan group of representatives that would have supported it. But when Biden made his State of the Union speech, it all fell apart. But the point is, let me give you what I like, my preferred example. There's $20 trillion worth of $20 billion worth of buildings the federal government owns that we don't use. We spend, I'm told, $2 billion every year maintaining this $20 billion worth of real estate that we don't use. Let's just sell a little bit of that, 1.5 trillion, 1.5 trillion of that. And sell it and put it into this account in order to have our growth. We've got a lot of unused assets. Now, there may be another way to do it, but that's why you need the president to come in and to have, okay, I'll sign it into law if you will do this.
So the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, announced that he's assembling a commission to look at potential cuts in the entire federal budget. Do you think that that's where leadership could come from? What's your prediction for that type of commission?
I can promise you that whatever he proposes, President Biden is going to use to attack on the campaign trail. And what's happening is that Biden, whenever there's a serious proposal, he attacks it as a cut. President Trump, former President Trump, if somebody says we got to fix social, he attacks it. So the leading presidential candidates are choosing to do nothing. They are making the conscious decision to deceive the American people that we don't need to do anything on social. Now, Trump will say we're going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. Try and hold your laughter. That's about 1% of the problem at best. That will not fix it. President Biden will say, well, I've got a plan. But he talked about it his last campaign. He's never submitted it to Congress. The way he's going to pay for it, he's already used that same mechanism to pay for Medicare, debt, everything else. And so he's kind of double counting his ways of paying for it. We need serious proposals by the men or women who wish to be leaders of our country. And if they don't come up with a serious proposal, they should not be the leader of our country.
Greg, Richfield, Wisconsin, a Republican.
Good morning, Senator Cassidy, and thank you for being on. I find it curious, you're talking about waste, food, and abuse being 1% or less. When we look at the billions and billions of dollars that this administration wasted or allowed to be fraudulently used for the COVID money, I also find it curious that you're lumping President Trump and President Biden in the same boat when there's obviously huge differences in the party, and you sound like a rhino, my friend.
Well, Greg, thanks, brother. But I'm here to tell you the truth, not to prattle a party line. Let me just say that. Now, you're right. There was billions wasted on COVID. But that's not in the Social Security Trust Fund. We're talking Social Security, not other things. And when I speak of Trump and Biden, I'm being objective. Look at their plans and their rhetoric on Social Security. Now, if you want me to say, oh my gosh, the Republican is perfect, the Republican is right, no matter what the Republican says, and your future is on the line, if we adopt one of these choosing to do nothing programs, you get a 24% cut in your Social Security benefit? What do you want me to do? Be honest with the American people and come up with a plan that keeps you from having a 24% cut, or just speak about a party line. Now, my obligation to my state and my country and my fellow Americans is to be honest. If you wish me to be something else, I'm not sure why any politician, I don't usually hear people say that, well, I want my politicians to not be honest. I'm being honest.
Senator, you also talked yesterday on Capitol Hill about college costs. Real quickly, because we only have less than a minute with you before you have to go. Can you tell us what you're proposing there?
Yeah, so right now, President Biden's plan, let me just say that, does nothing for the underlying problems. He just kind of forgives debt. He actually transfers it to other taxpayers, making us pay the obligations that someone willingly took on. But according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, in 5 years, we're going to be back in the same situation. What we are proposing, me and a collection, which are bipartisan proposals, by the way, which would be to create accountability and transparency. So if a young person is going to go off to college, she would be able to log on and see, wait a second, I'm going to enroll at this college in this curriculum. What is my likelihood of graduating in this curriculum at this college? How much will I have to borrow? What am I going to earn when I get out? With that information, she can make a decision. If she chooses to go and pay $200,000 for a 4-year education in which she's going to get out and make $40,000, $200,000 in debt, making $40,000 a year, at least her eyes are wide open.
Sounds like a good app.
It would be a great app. Oh my gosh, there's an app for that. We should do that.
Senator, thank you. Our viewers can learn more if they go to cassidy.senate.gov. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Greta.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, return to our question about the economy. Yesterday, the Federal Reserve pausing interest rates. We want to know, how has inflation over the past few months impacted your personal finances? There are the lines on your screen. Start dialing in.